So welcome everyone to the Capital Region Coalition for Digital Inclusion's quarterly meeting here with us this summer. We're so excited to have you with us. Before we start, I wanted to say a quick thank you to our sponsors as well.
Caitlin, you went on mute.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I wanted to go ahead and thank our CRCDI sponsors as well as our steering committee before we get started here. These include the Sacramento Employment and Training Agency, Sacramento Works, North Central Counties Consortium, the Yolo County Workforce Innovation Board, Golden Sierra Job Training Agency, SMUD, Union Bank, and AT&T. And I also want to thank our steering committee for all of their guidance and the path forward. And that includes the Sacramento Public Library, the Los Rios Community College District, Sacramento State, Clear Strategies, the City of Sacramento, and SETA once again. So big thanks to these folks. And I also wanted to introduce myself. So for those who are maybe new to our coalition, my name is Caitlin Blockus, and I'm a project manager at Valley Vision over broadband and digital equity projects. And before we get started, I also wanted to ask folks if you could please go ahead and mute your microphones. We love your dogs and cats and babies, but we don't want to hear them necessarily at this time, maybe later on. So if you could please mute your microphones and then place any direct questions in the chat or raise your virtual hand, we'll definitely call upon you. This meeting will have a large chunk of time for Q&A throughout the different sections. So we'll definitely have some time to chat and do Q&A. So please hold those questions till then or put those in the chat for us. And this meeting is recorded and will be provided with the post-meeting materials. So following this meeting, you'll receive a recording of the meeting, the PowerPoint that we go over today, as well as a summary of really comprehensive meeting notes. So all of the information coming out of this, you will receive. And I want to go over our agenda just briefly before I kick it over to our wonderful host of guest speakers today. You're here with me going over the introductions and icebreaker that we did a little bit earlier. Just shortly, I'm going to pass it over to some of our guest speakers to go over the state digital equity efforts, the federal BEAD process, digital navigator programs and regional digital inclusion efforts, local digital equity initiatives, and we'll have a little bit of closing discussion and some information about our next quarterly coalition meeting. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Scott Adams, who is the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy at the California Department of Technology. And Scott is also joined by Consultant and Senior Program Manager Sean Doherty at HR&A Advisors. So Scott, I'm going to kick it over to you and go ahead and spotlight you as well.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's great to be here. As a follow-up to our presentation earlier, but happy to provide an update of the joint kind of Broadband for All digital equity and BEAD planning process that's been going on throughout the state. So if you will indulge me, after talking, yesterday with Caitlin, we wanted to make a bit of a interactive presentation here. We'll show you some slides, but we're also going to show you some tools that we're using to kind of support folks on a call to action. So let me see. I am going to, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Got it. Cool. Let me see. How can I? Let's do a slideshow. There you go. So just real quick, I know some of this stuff is not new to folks, but the next chapter in Broadband for All is really leveraging the federal IIJA money through the BEAD program and the Digital Equity Act dollars. I think it helps to kind of reiterate that the Department of Technology is developing the digital equity plan and the CPUC is administering the BEAD program, and that as I think hopefully all of you have now participated in the multiple prongs of the process, that these are being coordinated and they will have to kind of fit together hand in glove in order to bring back the state share of both the BEAD and DE dollars after the plans are completed. And so, again, I know Marina is probably going to highlight this. The BEAD program, total national pool of 42 billion, $42.45 billion. Digital Equity Act 2.75. And given the size of our state, we're really looking forward to these funds, helping to achieve the goals of broadband for all. Wanted to just again center for everyone that on both fronts that the feds have directed states to prioritize investments for covered populations. And while many of you have seen these, just wanted to center it that really individuals living in covered households with incomes at or below 150% of the federal poverty level, aging individuals 60 plus, justice involved individuals, veterans, folks with disabilities, folks with language barriers, members of racial or ethnic minority groups, folks who live primarily in rural areas are specifically called out in the digital equity notice of funding opportunity, which is really informing the development of the plan. And then 2 additional groups are called out in the BEAD notice of funding opportunity, specifically related to historic underrepresentation and jobs here. So those are women and those who identify as female and members of the LGBTQI plus community. Wanted to reiterate again that the Department of Technology, the Public Utilities Commission, and other state entities have tried to create a joint planning process that was or is as expansive and cross-cutting as possible to allow for as much engagement, bi-directional, feedback and input as possible from, key partners, stakeholders, members of the community and residents of the state. So, there's the statewide planning group that really expanded the member entities of the California Broadband Council to include the state agencies that have a connection to the covered populations and subject matter expertise related to outcomes that, when all is said and done, if broadband for all is achieved, we will improve outcomes. Those are virtual convenings. We've had 2 of those that have been open to the public that, has had quite a bit of engagement. There's the outcome area working groups that we've created 6 virtual outcome area working groups, one focusing on digital equity and education, the other, another on digital equity and health, one on digital literacy and inclusion, one on workforce and economic development. I know folks have been here and participated in those, one on essential services, and then tribal collaboration, where we're bringing in both members of tribal nations and adjacent groups that are working to support those tribes. We have conducted 23 of the 24 virtual outcome area working groups. So that's underway. There are the survey, which are other tools that you'll hear more about. I think a lot of you have heard about those, but we're in the final stages here. So there's going to be a remaining call to action. There's, the requirement to, do, solicit citizen input on barriers and needs, and then also a requirement to develop a statewide asset inventory. And so we'll tell you about that. The regional planning workshops, another opportunity to actually get in person in community, hosted a lot of those, and ongoing public engagement. So I think what I would say about the process itself is that we're incredibly excited and proud and grateful that thus far all of these different processes have, engaged, tens of thousands of Californians in the process here. So really excited to go over some of the inputs. Wanted to shift real quickly to reiterate that we've done 17 regional workshops in 17 different regions throughout the state, including, on May 11th in the Capital Corridor area. And in addition to those, we have completed 2 of 4 group tribal consultations. We were on Tuesday up in Reading, and on Thursday, yesterday in Porterville. We'll be in Southern California next week, and we will have a virtual convening there. So these have afforded us a lot of opportunity to get in person with folks and to kind of cross-check and pollinate what we're hearing from our planning group, what we're hearing from the virtual working groups and our surveys. Wanted to go over quickly the digital equity survey. Want to note that California Emerging Technology Fund has been a central partner in all of the Broadband for All digital equity and BEAD planning processes. They've been helping lead the coordination of the local events, and they've been working on a statewide phone survey that is intended to be scientifically random digit dialing to get a good pulse on the needs. What we have done is, again, knowing how big the state is and how constrained phone surveys can be, we've created a mobile friendly and online version of the survey that we're doing by phone to maximize citizen input. And so you've probably heard this before, but we're going to reiterate it again. We tried to make this be the most inclusive and accessible survey as possible, which was why it was important that it was optimized for mobile phones, knowing that they're fairly ubiquitous throughout the state, even where connectivity, is not that strong. And so this survey can be taken by receiving a link by email or a link through a text message on a mobile phone. It's been translated into 14 different languages, and each of those languages we've created audio files for folks who have vision impairments or low levels of literacy. So the questions can be read to them and they can click the answers. And so Sean's going to demo that for you. But I wanted to show you that this is a snapshot as of this morning. And, it should say that we've had over, I can't see my screen. Yeah, there you go. 15,955 responses throughout the state of California. The map here shows a visualization of the survey, based on federal guidelines, can't really ask for any personally identifiable information other than a zip code that helps us tag, an approximation of where the person, the individual lives. I should note there's an open source speed test that's built into the survey, which is helpful for us to connect this, but the data here shows you based on the outreach of the partners, and we know that the consortia and Valley Vision and many of you are helping promote that out into the region. This is a rough sketch of the responses by county. This here gives you a little bit of an idea of how we're getting responses by language, and overwhelming in English, but you can see a lot of responses in, simplified Chinese, Spanish, traditional Chinese, etc. And then you can see how, oops, sorry about that. You can see how folks that self-identified with members of as you know, being members of covered populations, and we've been able to get some very significant responses. You'll see a higher proportion of folks ages 60 or older, and that is thanks in part to some very passionate and aggressive outreach that AARP is doing to their membership. They've been really working with the department and PUC throughout this whole process. You'll also see that there's a really significant, probably more than we thought we would get, response from rural communities, and that's a result of the Rural County Representatives of California. You know, they've taken it upon themselves to send direct notifications to the county executive teams and ask them to try to generate 250 to 500 responses per county. So I know, Caitlin, do you think I should share that other thing I was telling you about?
Yes, I was just thinking about that. Absolutely.
Okay, let me see if I can do that. So I'm going to show you a tracking tool that we use. Oops. Is it showing?
I see like the top third of
Okay,
California above.
let me do this.
Scott, you want me to share my screen? I have that up too.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I will. Okay, can you guys see this now?
Yes.
Got it. So this is like an internal tracking tool that Sean and the team at Broadband Equity Partnership has developed for us. And we thought, you know, given how strong of partners that you all have been with us on this, that we would give you some insights into how we're tracking this. Obviously, the visualization here shows kind of the density of responses by zip codes that are then clustered, you know, within county boundaries. We still have to normalize some of this and go through and clean some of the data up, but this has given you an idea of the responses. So here is where we can track the whole, you know, responses by county, and you see, no surprise, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, Santa Clara, Orange, Sacramento, densely populated areas having significant responses. What's kind of cool and interesting is when you look at, like, you know, Mendocino, Tuolumne, Madera, some of these, you know, other counties, Butte, even Calaveras are, you know, have been working really hard to generate responses. And I think what that shows us is that the functionality of the survey works. And so that'll, you know, we're going to bring that up in our call to action. But what I did want to show you is, here is the tracker that shows the responses we're getting in language. And actually, it looks like these numbers went up a little today. We're really reaching out to digital equity coalitions, you know, city, county folks, to try to get or partner with us to get additional responses in these other language, given that it's really important to identify the needs of folks with language barriers. And, you know, so that's something that, as you folks are working within community, if you have some unique distribution systems that can help get folks, you know, direct access to the survey. This is just a reiteration of some of those numbers, but you can see the aging individuals, ethnic and racial minority communities, and these are folks that have self-identified, folks from rural communities, individuals with disabilities, folks at or below, you know, the federal poverty level, veterans, immigrant communities, language barriers. So very excited that we continue to get more information. And Caitlin asked me, here I've kind of sorted out Caitlin, did I get Sacramento, Yuba, Yolo, Sutter? Is that what you requested?
Yeah, I would probably also add Placer and El Dorado counties too, but we serve such a large region. So yeah, but this is great. Thank you.
Got it. Well, and I thought I can do that now and we can give you a snapshot. But these are the responses that we're getting to date thus far from these 4 counties. And these are the languages that we're getting responses in. And this is kind of the distribution of the folks who have identified, with the covered population. So again, got a big representation of folks 60 plus, getting good response from the other demographic groups. Just wanted to share this with you all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And this is just some insights about, how incredibly successful, your guys' outreach has been to help us get responses to this public survey, and wanted to have Sean go through. Let me see, are there some questions? No. Wanted to have Sean go through and show some of the functionality of the survey if you haven't already seen it, and go through some outreach toolkit information.
Great, thanks, Scott. Yes, as Scott just mentioned, there was a lot of effort put into making this the most accessible survey possible, making it mobile friendly. And I think a big component of that was translating it into 14 different languages. So this is just the homepage of the digital equity survey. Again, this is intended for individuals and for households to complete. Very clear, easy to read. As you can see, you can access all of the 14 languages right here on the main screen, or by toggling up here. And and then just clicking on any of the languages, it almost instantaneously converts it into that other language. And then down here is the audio functionality. Every single page has been translated verbally into all of those 14 languages. And I'm just going to play a demo of that sound clip now, hoping it comes through.
California State Digital Equity Plan.
So every single page, again, has been translated into the 14 languages. It's very easy. It's very clean to read. This is kind of the minimum requirement of required questions. Are you 18 and do you reside in California? But Scott also pointed out that there's a speed test. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Well, and I'm going to say it's not the minimum requirement. It's that in order to participate in the survey, right, Sean, like a person has to be a resident of California, and
yeah.
They have to at least be 18 or older based on the federal requirements.
Correct. Yeah. So you meet both of those standards. We encourage you and we want you to take this test. And as you go further on into the survey, it asks a lot of demographic questions. You have access to internet, maybe some of those barriers. Again, all great data that we want to collect and incorporate into our state digital equity plan. But as you go further on, if you happen to click on yes, you do have access to broadband. It encourages you to take an internet speed test, and all you do is click. Just going to refresh the page. I loaded this a little bit earlier.
Would you like to know how fast your internet connection?
I think that's broken on my end. So you can either opt to skip or take the internet speed test, but taking that speed test is very important information that we would like to gather. And I know that, kind of the call to action here is to share the digital equity survey out to your networks and out to your communities. And to help you with that process, we've developed a lot of a toolkit, essentially. It's located on the Broadband for All website. We will share this out afterwards. I will put it actually in the chat below. These are all openly and shareable files. So the digital equity survey toolkit is located here. We have everything from invitation letters all translated into various languages. So you can copy this and put it in an email and send that out to your community. We have printable flyers, again, translated into a number of emails. Maybe you're doing a community event and you want to have them publicly posted. I know some institutions have printed them out and put them at, next to the checkout window at libraries or summer school events or whatever you might be engaging in your community. These are great flyers you can print out and just have made available. Lots of social media content, again, in a number of languages. Use this for LinkedIn. You can use this for Instagram, whatever your social media channels are that you communicate to your community. Download, save these, upload them to your social media sites. So again, all of the documentation, everything that is created in here is for you to use at your disposal, and we hope that you find them useful. Any questions about the digital survey, the public survey?
Yes. How long is the survey going to be active?
It's currently up until June 30th, and we are considering extending it for another month through the summer, part of the, at least through July. One of the challenges we have is we've got to develop a draft digital equity plan and put that up for public comment, for 30 days. But the value in this public survey that we're seeing is, given the response that we have, we have enough aggregated data to make a lot of, a lot of information for the digital equity plan. But the more county and local data that we get, the more useful it can be to, regions and counties, and even cities to help direct theirs. And that's fully our intention. This is a public survey that's funded with public, money. We will put the raw data, up and share it with folks who are interested in pulling that down and analyzing it for their own regions.
Thank you. And yeah, folks, inviting everyone to drop a question in the chat or raise your Zoom hand. And while folks are formulating that, I actually have a question for you all. On that broadband speed tool that's ingrained within the survey, does that, and this is related to something someone mentioned in the chat, does that collect data based on the physical location where the individual is taking the survey from, or is it more of like an aggregate across the state of what folks' speeds are? Like, can it collect, like if I'm in Sacramento County and I take the survey, will it be tied back to my location in Sacramento County, or is it just more of a broad swath?
So it's a really good question, because I know Marina's probably going to talk about the state BEAD allocations and how mapping informs those. Like this, the data, given we're constrained that we can't ask for people's physical addresses, is not going to be like crowdsourced. There are some firms that are doing that kind of crowdsourced data, but what it can do is when you connect the speeds that people take, hopefully in their residences or in their businesses, and you connect it to the zip codes and the voluntarily self-identified information on the different covered populations. There are other questions that ask, like, who is your internet provider? How much do you pay? There's a lot of information that we can still get and infer from that that will help us, kind of direct and shape the digital equity in the BEAD plans.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I want to open up the virtual floor if anyone has questions. And Sean, thank you for sharing what that looks like. I am excited to know that it is available by zip code.
Yeah.
Any additional questions? I actually personally have one more, but I want to not be selfish and open the floor for anyone in the audience who has one. Okay. I'm going to move forward with my question, but I know that the state is using this information to formulate, our digital equity plan here in California. Will the results of the survey be public at any point, or certain parts of it, like looking at kind of the overall data, similar to what you just showed, but available to the public? Is that an opportunity we might have?
Yeah, and there's a variety of inputs, and so we wanted a holistic approach that incorporated both qualitative and quantitative data. I mean, the NTIA and the federal government was really clear that this was an opportunity to get community and lived experiences. So there's a number of inputs, and so that's like input from the planning group, from the virtual working groups, from the workshops. But yes, we will summarize the aggregate data for the state and explain how that has helped inform the draft digital equity plan, and we will provide the raw data, like I said, so that folks who want to do take the information and use it to direct their own digital equity efforts within a region, a county, a city, can do that as well.
Thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you. We did have a couple. Do we still have a little bit of more time?
Yeah, absolutely. About 6 more minutes, definitely.
Okay. Cool. And my sharing ability, I don't know if I can still share. I can. One thing that we did want to ask folks is to still, particularly many of the folks in this coalition are currently doing digital equity work, or are beginning to do digital equity work, is wanted to do a call to action that if you have not filled out the digital equity ecosystem mapping tool that's helping us develop a statewide inventory of assets and programs, that you do that. And so, Sean, we have one for state, county, local governments, nonprofits, philanthropic organizations, etc., and then a separate one for internet service providers. Sean is going to kind of walk you through how to do this digital equity ecosystem. I mean, it's really important that if you're doing this work, that we're able to map it and communicate that out and identify that as we shape the digital equity plan for the state. So, Sean?
Sure. As Scott mentioned, this is our DEEM tool, our digital equity ecosystem mapping tool. And this one in particular is meant to capture data, again, from government agencies, nonprofits, community-based organizations, researchers, religious organizations, anybody who is currently doing digital equity work or would like to do digital equity work in the future. Again, it takes about 10 minutes to complete, very clear and easy to read. And the first page is really your basic demographics: name, organization, counties where you serve. Do you serve any of those covered populations? Very important information for us to be able to capture. And then how would you identify? And I think this is really a helpful way as you're completing it yourself to think about, who do I collaborate with? Who do I partner with? Because we know, this is, this work is not done in a silo. So reading through this and being like, oh yes, I do collaborate with the local community college, maybe on a workforce development program, or yes, I do work with foundations on this work. So I think that's just a useful part about this survey. And then down here, really asking, what services do you provide or would you like to provide? Do you do a device distribution program? Do you have a digital literacy class that you teach to adults 60 plus? Learning a lot about those programs is very important to us. And as you get a little bit further on in there, at the very end, there is also a portal for additional information. and being able to, as you talk through here and you say, we do all this great work here and we serve 5,000 people, but, you can go into more detail in that annual report, you go into more detail in that research paper or the white paper, add that at the end. We want all of that additional data in addition to what you can provide through the survey solution, through the survey instrument. And we also have a toolkit for this as well. So going back up just one level, again, all of this is saved on the same drive available at Broadband for All, and I'll put it in there. The DEEM Toolkit. Here are the survey instructions in English and in Spanish, because the survey is offered in both languages. And this literally walks through every question you could see in this survey. Again, if you do have a computer or a device access program, you're going to want to go to section 3. And down here is section 2, and we got section 3, which of the following describes your organization role? So you can prepare all the information to make completing the survey really easy and really efficient. So again, as Scott reiterated, this is for organizations working in the community, and we'd love to see every organization that's participating here complete this if you haven't already.
And Sean, I recaptured the share function. Can folks see this here? You can see that the folks in the region have done a pretty good job. So thank you very much, Caitlin and others, for encouraging folks to fill this out. You'll see a good response in yellow. Sacramento, Placer, El Dorado could use, a little more assistance up here, but I can't thank you all enough for the amount of partnership there is. This is just kind of a spread of the kind of organizations that are filling them out. I do want to show real quick, we'll send out the slides that have all the links to the toolkits like immediately after this meeting. Some reiteration of ways to get involved. We did want to point out there's a couple more upcoming events, particularly the statewide planning group meetings in July and October, which are really going to focus on the draft plan and then the final digital equity plan. We've got a rough revised timeline here, and just really can't underscore enough how grateful we are and how much we want to thank you all for just your partnership, virtually, and the ability to come together and meet many of you and interact with you at the excellent workshop that you all put together and hosted.
Thank you so much, Scott and Sean. It was an honor to have both of you with us again. And we will, of course, send all of this information out to our registrants, along with, as Scott mentioned, that May 11th workshop. The the state has dutifully put together a list of all of the recommended strategies and key findings from that workshop, which is super interesting to review. So we will also be sending that out to folks. And I believe Navreet dropped it in the chat as well, but Valley Vision also wrote a blog all about that event. But thank you both so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to share all of this. I'm also going to, on kind of the same note as that DEEM tool, drop a link. I think both of these tools are excellent. Both the DEEM tool and Valley Vision has worked to put up the Capital Region Digital Inclusion Portal, which is another similar asset mapping website. But I think the DEEM tool, I really like how we can map all these other organizations who are doing the work for that collaborative side, versus I would say our digital inclusion portal, of course, has that as well, but it's more focused on serving the community. So I like having kind of both sides of the coin there. But thank you so much, Scott and Sean, for joining us. I think just shortly here, I'm going to share my screen once again and move it over. And we are excited to also welcome Marina McClatchy, who is a federal program officer for us here in California over the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. We got both the state and federal folks here today. So I will pass it over to you, Marina.
Okay, sounds good. Do I just let you know when the slides need to be clicked?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. So my name is Marina McClatchy. Thank you for being here and having me here. I really appreciate it. NTIA, I think a lot of you are familiar with NTIA, but just in case you're not, NTIA is part of the US Department of Commerce, and sort of why it is getting more attention recently and engaging in significantly more outreach is because that NTIA is the primary federal agency responsible for distributing the broadband funds associated with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So Scott had a really great slide that kind of summarized those programs. There's the Digital Equity Act programs, including the State Digital Equity Plan and later the Digital Equity Capacity Grants, which will help implement those plans. And then there's the sort of infrastructure side on the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD. And I primarily support BEAD. There are 2 FPOs, or federal program officers, in California. The other one is Gladys Papalatak, who is very lovely, and is focused a little bit more deeply on the DE side. Next slide, please. So just to start off, I think if you have heard me speak, you've probably seen this slide way too many times, but I like to start off with it just because California has an extreme need, and I think we know that, but that also means that the solution is sort of not all in one place when it comes to how do we get high-speed internet for all Californians. So IIJA, the programs I'm supporting, are really only one piece of this bigger puzzle of high-speed internet for all Californians, and there's sort of multiple funding sources that kind of go into this landscape. It can be a little bit confusing in California just because of all of the different ways, all of the different programs and overlapping things. And so I just like to start by sort of laying the groundwork so you can see where the programs that we support fall into the greater ecosystem of California broadband. So the 2 main state agencies in California that handle broadband are the California Department of Technology, and then the California Public Utilities Commission. And so generally, when I'm thinking through what do waves of broadband funding look like in the state of California, my brain puts it into 3 types of groupings. So the first one is the sort of historic programs that have sort of, I see them as pre-pandemic programs. And so that is represented here in light blue. You can see the California Advanced Services Fund. Valley Vision specifically receives the grants through the CISF Consortia account, and that is funded by a surcharge on customer bills. So that's sort of the funding source for that program. Next, we have sort of SB 156, or the July 2021 broadband budget package. And a lot of this was supported by COVID recovery response funds. So there are several programs associated with it, which I'm sure you're familiar with, like the statewide middle mile network that's being constructed by CDT. The CPUC currently has given out already local agency technical assistance grants and is getting ready to open up the federal funding account in the next week or 2. And so that is a mix of generally of general fund and ARPA dollars, or American Rescue Plan Act dollars. The red, which is the programs that I primarily support at NTIA, that NTIA has oversight over, are the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So that's in red. So you can see on the CPUC side, we have the BEAD program as they will be implementing it in the state. And then on the CDT side, we have the Equity Planning Grant, which you just heard a lot of really wonderful things that are happening under that umbrella through Scott and his team. Okay. Next slide. So the BEAD program specifically is $42.5 billion nationally for infrastructure planning and implementation. And so some of the eligible uses include things like planning for the deployment of internet, deploying or upgrading internet service, installing internet in multi-tenant buildings, and then implementing adoption and digital equity programs, as well as workforce training programs. I think a key thing to note is that the main goal of the BEAD program, as it is conceived, is to connect every single American. And so that is what takes precedent in this program. So primarily when you're looking at the example eligible uses of funds, these first 3 are non-negotiable when we're talking about what states must achieve. They have to connect everyone. And then to the extent that there's additional money left over, they can explore some of these other options. Thankfully, BEAD is not going to be the only source of digital equity funding. The Digital Equity Act provides for a competitive grant program as well as a capacity program that will be implemented through the state. So realistically, I think a large chunk of California's funding is going to need to be spent on connecting unserved and underserved households just because of how great the need is in the state. Timeline-wise, this is a program where NTIA will provide money to the states, and then the states will provide grants to applicants, and applicants to construct infrastructure, and applicants can be traditional ISPs, they can be local and tribal governments, they can be nonprofits, they can be public or private utility districts. There's really a lot of variety in terms of who can apply for these funds. Electric co-ops is another one, but we don't get those quite as often in California. In terms of sort of the timeline, where we're at in the program is that the California Public Utilities Commission has to submit 2 separate plans to NTIA. And so the first one is the 5-year plan, and that's this really high level overview of how California is going to achieve universal service. The State Digital Equity Plan is a key component of the 5-year plan, and the 5-year plan will incorporate all of the feedback and the analysis that's being done through these events and all of these other data gathering activities that Scott mentioned in his presentation. The next thing that is sort of upcoming that will need to be turned into NTIA by the end of the year is the initial proposal. And the initial proposal is basically, if the 5-year plan is the high-level document, the initial proposal is the actual strategic plan of how they're going to implement the nuts and bolts of this program. And so who can apply as subgrantees, what are the program rules, how are they going to run a challenge process, all of these types of details. And because of the way the California Public Utilities Commission works, they will be doing it through an open rulemaking. They have a BEAD proceeding specifically, and so they will likely be releasing a staff proposal that previews some of these rules in the next coming months, and that will be an opportunity for the public to comment on it, because this initial proposal does have to include public comment in order to be turned into NTIA. Moving forward into next year, we'll work to approve states proposals, and then after that they can run their mapping challenge process, which I'll talk about a little bit more upcoming, as well as then start running their actual subgrantee process and accepting applications. Next slide. Okay, so a couple key things in this program. I've just spewed a bunch of information at you, but why I'm here is because we're at sort of a critical point in the program, and there's a couple key things going on that I want you to be aware of within the next couple months. So the first one is the BEAD funding allocation. So there's 42.5 billion nationally, but that needs to be allocated individually to states. NTIA is on track to make that allocation and to announce it by June 30th. So that will be next week. So next week, we should have an idea of the total amount of BEAD funding that California will be receiving from that 42.5 billion bucket. And that's really going to inform a lot of strategies when it comes to the BEAD program. How much can be fiber? How much needs to be alternate technologies? How does that relate in terms of the total amount of funding California has already dedicated, because this will just be one small part of California's larger investment in broadband. And in terms of sort of how is this allocation determined, NTIA is going to release more information on how the calculation actually plays out once it is released, but here are the things that go into that. First, the new FCC broadband data maps will be utilized, primarily the version of the maps that came out on May 30th. This is a statutory requirement in terms of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and I do want to point it out because California has several maps, and this is the FCC map will be the basis for these allocations as opposed to the federal funding account map or the California Interactive Broadband Map. In terms of the actual allocation themselves, each state starts out with 100 million as their sort of base allocation, and then the territories start with 25 million. And then so that's equally distributed. And then there is an allocation calculation that is sort of a function of percentages and division. And so NTIA is using cost model data that takes into account a bunch of things like topography, technology type, poverty level, all of these different factors that impact broadband deployment to set what's called a high cost area. And so the high cost areas, the way the allocation will work is that the percentage California will receive will be a function of the total number of high cost areas in California divided by the total number of high cost areas in the United States. And then that will be added to the all the remaining unserved locations in California divided by all of the remaining unserved locations in the United States. So it's a little bit of a complicated formula that was outlined specifically in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the BEAD Notice of Funding Opportunity. But all of this to say, we will know next week what California's portion of that funding will be, which will be really helpful. Next slide. So another thing that I want to sort of note moving forward is a key part of this program is going to be the BEAD challenge process. And I think that there's a lot of reasonable concerns about the FCC maps and whether they're truly representative or accurate. We know they're getting better. We know they have functions in order to get better, but realistically, we have to use the maps for the allocation, but we're allowing states to incorporate their own data and run their own challenge process for BEAD eligibility. So the allocation is determined fully by the map. The actual unserved locations in your community that will be eligible for BEAD will be determined by this challenge process run at the state level. And so there's a couple different steps in this process that are key. First, the CPUC has to propose a challenge process and get public comment on it, right? So before there's even a challenge process run or anything like that, the CPUC needs to be put into writing what this model challenge process will look like for California and receive public feedback on it and incorporate that feedback. That will likely happen sometime this fall. Then they have to get NTIA's approval. So NTIA has to go through their challenge process, say, yes, we approve you doing that. Once they get approval, then they can actually start to run the challenge process. So some key differences between the FCC challenge process and the challenge process that states will be running individually in each state. So the FCC challenge process is really focused on how much BEAD funding is provided for a state or territory in response to the program. When it comes to the BEAD challenge process, there'll be elements that states can include or that they are allowed to include that aren't necessarily accepted by the FCC as the basis for challenges, right? So through the BEAD challenge process, local governments, nonprofits, tribal governments, and ISPs will be able to challenge on the map whether a location should or should not be eligible for BEAD funding. The FCC map challenge process is more specifically a function of served versus unserved and what services provided. So the outcome is that this will determine the locations and community anchor institutions which within each jurisdiction are eligible for BEAD funding, right? So they have to use the FCC map as a starting point, but they can also get approved additional modifications. Like one of the modifications that will be allowed will be speed tests. There are rules around it, but like the FCC does not accept challenges on the basis of speed tests. States can opt to include them in their BEAD challenge process to flip a location from served to unserved. Next slide. So I think a key thing to note with this program is that it's a federal program that is being implemented by the state. So there is a lot of different back and forth in terms of coordinating between the entities in order to achieve the goals of the implementation of the program. So this is just a little bit of summary about how the challenge process will work and who kind of is responsible for what. So NTIA will basically have oversight over approving the challenge process as well as approving the final decisions and results of the challenge process. But the challenge process itself will be primarily run by the California Public Utilities Commission. Similarly, in terms of the relationship moving forward between NTIA and CPUC, we're here to support the CPUC in implementing the BEAD program goals, but you're also always welcome to reach out to me as the federal representative. So please, we're here to be boots on the ground, so please don't hesitate for any specific questions or concerns to reach out directly to me, because we're happy to speak with you as well. Tons of information. Any questions?
While folks are formulating their thoughts or maybe just being shy, I will also add that Valley Vision, in addition to this coalition, we manage the Connected Capital Area Broadband Consortium. And through that arm, we actually meet with Marina once a month. So let's say if you have a thought coming up later on the road, we're happy to either connect you directly with Marina or raise up any questions you may have in the future to her. On that note, any questions? Are we all being brain sponges this Friday? And
Caitlin, hi, it's Kathy McKim. Thank you. Marina, excellent presentation. Thank you. I just wanted to better understand timing. I think I have it, but as far as the sub-grantee selection process for the states, do you anticipate that to be in 2024? You're muted.
That's not helpful. Yes, we do anticipate it being in 2024 for California. Each state, the way it works is states are on different timelines. They have sort of the absolute how long they can take, and then some are moving faster, right? So Louisiana is really interested in getting all of their sub-grantee process completed by the end of the year. That is not just due to the complexity in California, that's likely not going to be possible here. And so this actual process of selecting sub-grantees will likely happen sometime in 2024. And the way that we're sort of looking at it is that, you know, California will be on track probably to submit their initial proposal to NTIA by December. Once we approve that initial proposal, they have a year to actually run that sub-grantee process and deliver the results to us. So within that year, they have to do the challenge process, run the sub-grantee or process it, and then report back to NTIA. And so all of that is going to need to happen within that year period. So sometime in 2024 will be when applications will open.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Kathy. Any additional questions for Marina? Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Marina, for taking the time to join us. And for folks, if anything does pop up, please feel free to drop that in the chat. I'm going to keep moving this along here. And next, I want to kick it over to Kevin Flash, who is a member of this coalition's steering committee, and also to talk about digital navigator programs, regional digital inclusion efforts. So Kevin, I will kick the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Caitlin. You know, I wanted to talk a little bit, and this timing on this really goes well because as we're looking at what the state's doing and what we've just been informed about what the federal government is doing in terms of the funding, I really appreciate the comment, Kathy, knowing when we're going to be getting funding in potentially in 2024 to do the work that we're doing locally. And that work really is going to be focused in the timeline on our capacity building. When you begin to look at it, you can hear that there's a real interest to get everybody connected in California, and the state work looking at digital equity with the emphasis of the need in our most needy communities who have been excluded for years. It's really going to be helpful now to have some funding that we're going to be able to use to build up our capacity. And so I'm really thinking of, and I love acronyms. So what I'm going to say right now is, I really like the acronym CALE. And the reason I like that is I was sitting there the other evening with a friend of mine, and he was making some dinner, and we talk about what we're doing for healthy food and healthy eating. And he goes, you know, years ago, I was working at Brother Oliver's in Sacramento, and we used to use kale just to keep the ice cold around the salad trays that we would build. He goes, now everybody's eating kale because it's healthy. And it kind of got me thinking of an acronym that I'm going to use today, which is CALE with a C, Capacity for Adoption Leading to Equity. Because everything that you're really hearing about the state plan for equity and what Marina talked about in terms of building capacity to get us to equity is really about where we're at today in the capital region. The capacity that we want to build is really going to be dependent upon our digital navigators. And there's some work being done currently at the state level, as well as at the local level, that's helping inform where are we with digital navigators and where are we with our digital inclusion services and our digital inclusion service program. Eventually, you know, the digital navigators need a certain amount of training, and we've been so fortunate in this past year to have BiteBack come and be included with us in the digital navigator expansion in the Sacramento area. And when you really begin to look at it, you really begin to see we're at a place where we have had in the past few years some experiences, some interested parties, and we've built relationships in the Sacramento area that position us very well to expand our capacity. Relationships that we've had through the coalition with folks at United Way, with folks from the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Association, with places like the city of Sacramento itself. These have really formed us under the leadership of Valley Vision to say, hey, we begin to know what organizations in the area can begin to play roles. People like Computers for Kids and the work that they're doing to refurbish computers, and their work is such a critical yeah, I'm going to take a little sip of water here. And Computer for Kids work as such a critical component for the work that we're going to be expanding in the next year in the Capital Region. So looking at it, the digital navigators are so important because what they're going to be able to do as the funding becomes available is they're going to be coming and helping us with adoption. And when you listen to where Sacramento is related to the state and related to the nation, is you have this real big investment in the infrastructure in the middle mile. So when NTIA and the federal government is talking about getting to every person, you know that one of those things is getting that middle mile infrastructure, working with the ISPs to build the fiber networks or alternative technologies that help us get into the communities. But once that infrastructure has been built, what's going to be critical is adoption. That adoption will allow those community members to begin to access the internet, know how they can get it in an affordable way, know how they can get suitable devices to their place, and know where there's technology support for digital literacy so that they know how to navigate the internet. So even though the technology build out through the middle mile is so critical, it can often be like a bridge going nowhere if it doesn't have that last mile effort in an area like the Capital Region to be able to reach those community members identified in those maps through the state and the federal work. Digital navigators are those who come from the community to be able to connect with the community, to be able to let them know what's available to them. And we really don't want to build a bridge to nowhere. We want adoption to be a key to the work that we're doing in the Capital Region for all the counties around us. So what we're looking at right now in the Capital Region is understanding what it takes to have a successful digital navigator program. That digital navigator program should cover some content that's very specific that digital navigators need to know. We know that digital navigators coming from a trusted community are really key with connecting to that community. And they need to understand what digital equity is about, the terminology we use, and the services we provide through digital inclusion services. They need to know about affordable internet that's offered through things like ACP programs. They need to know, where can I get a suitable device? Things that are offered from Computers for Kids. They need to know what can they do once they get there to connect with education, to connect with healthcare, to connect with jobs, and all these kind of connections being defined through the work groups that Scott mentioned earlier are going to be critical to the real fulfillment and adoption of our programs in this area. So what are we doing with digital navigators right now? Well, right now, what we do know is that there really isn't a consistent program where somebody can say, hey, I'm a digital navigator, I've been trained, and these are the things I know, and these are the communities I can be deployed to. That's going to be critical as we ramp up the adoption phase next year. We're currently working with a number of efforts in the Sacramento area and a number of organizations to look at a consistent digital navigator training program such that community members could come in, leading CBOs could come in, people can be trained, and we can deploy digital navigators knowing that they've gone through a consistent training program and have them certified. This program is being led by CETF, and it's also being informed by a couple of grants that have been received through the Connecting Minority Communities grant program through the NTIA. These CMC programs, one of them at Sac State, another one at Merced, both have the CETF coming together to create a learning community. And that learning community is discussing the core elements of a digital navigator training program, which will be used, as well as elective components that can be there that are regionally specific. For example, I was on a call earlier this week with both with Sac State and Merced, led by CETF, and Merced said, hey, what we're doing to connect our minority community program is focusing on some relationships with Apple, and they're getting Apple devices. That would be applicable to them for their digital navigators to be trained that way. Whereas at Sac State, that emphasis is going to be in the Lemon Hill community, and the emphasis there may have other electives related to healthcare or educational needs that are going to be a bit different. So coming together and discuss these things and be able to have this framework with CETF that is going to be a digital navigator framework or training guide is going to be very useful for our work coming in the next year. We're also soliciting input through this work, which a lot of it is being led through Sacramento State and the faculty there in conjunction with some faculty review at Sac City College. We've also reached out to a number of community members and people who have done the work. Two of them that I think are really significant are Bite Back, which has been doing training in the greater Sacramento area, and their program, their 360 program, is very significant, very helpful. And so we're soliciting them for input for the program that CETF is doing. Another is the World Education. I know Jerry is here today. We've reached out to him and said, Jerry, you have some expertise in this area. For the work you've done in the greater Sacramento area, can you begin to take and review and input so that we get a plan that's very inclusive, very helpful, and very relevant to our area? CETF is hoping to have that digital navigator framework program developed in a draft form for pilot use in September of this year so that it can be used in the CMC grant in the Lemon Hill area that is being run out of Sac State. Later on, Merced is going to be looking at that and trying to adopt it too for their use in the fall, late fall, early springtime. So that's some of the work that we're doing with digital navigators. And right now, what we want to do in conjunction with people that are doing the work like Bite Back is begin to track the communities that so far have had digital navigators trained with them, as well as then plan for deployment forward. So a little bit about the digital inclusion plan that we want to do coming forward to begin to take digital navigators, connect them with communities that are being identified in the greater Sacramento area, and have what we call digital inclusion events. So digital inclusion events are going to focus on things like affordable connectivity, the ACP program that allows for discounted internet to people who qualify for it. We want to focus in with that also on devices. What is the need of the community for those devices? And also let them know they have technology support and that they have some digital literacy training they can participate in. So one of the digital inclusion upcoming events that's being planned is going to be in the West Sacramento area. So right now, Valley Vision in conjunction with Computers for Kids and the local community leaders in West Sacramento are planning an event in August that'll be a digital inclusion event, and we'll be releasing information to the Capital Region Coalition for Digital Inclusion members a little bit later, informing them the details about where and the times and the date of that event, some of which is somewhat known, but we want to solidify. Again, knowing that we have partners in the community and we have spent the last year building these relationships, we know that rolling out in through the CMC grant is something that's going to be happening in the fall time as well. So we'll be looking at training people in the Lemon Hill area through the Sac State grant and begin to reach out for digital inclusion events there. Digital inclusion, we hope, will be in the terms of events and also in what we would have as permanent places, locations that would be hosting digital navigators on a permanent basis. So you could walk in to maybe a CBO or a location, a community-based location, and you could say, hey, you know, a community member knows that on Tuesdays and Thursdays, there'll be digital navigators there hosted. So in the future, as we go to 2023, 2024, we're looking at both digital inclusion events and digital navigator hosted sites that are going to support adoption in our communities. One of the other exciting things, I think, is the work that's being done by the city of Sacramento and what they're looking at to really uplift communities in the greater Sacramento area and specifically within the city of Sacramento itself. So we know we've been partnering with the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment agencies as they begin to look at the future in the core urban areas. As we begin to explore urban areas and rural areas, what are the needs and where are the locations that are being looked at for further deployment and training of digital navigators, so that when this funding comes out in 2024, and we know where the middle mile is going to go, where those communities are going to be needed for through these mappings, we're going to be prepared and ready and have built the capacity over these next 9 to 12 months to be able to actually quickly deploy and use that funding to have an immediate impact on us. So I really like to come back to that acronym CALE. What we're doing is we're building capacity for adoption, leading to equity, C-A-L-E. If you can remember that, because there's so much covered in this little hour and a half session. Thank you, Caitlin, for bringing this together. A lot of information. But when it comes to us in the Capital Region, Sacramento, remember what we're doing in the next 9 to 12 months is getting that capacity ready for the adoption phase, which will lead us to equity and digital equity in our communities.
Thank you so much, Kevin. And I love the full circle back on Kale. And I put this in the chat, but I love how it connects to our farm to fork slogan here in Sacramento.
Healthy for us, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Got to get our rich, deep greens in, our leafy greens. Thank you so much, Kevin. And I think just to make sure we stay on time here, really quick, we might have time for about one question, but otherwise I might encourage folks to put it in the chat. But anyone have a quick question for Kevin on some of those digital navigator initiatives in the community or in the region, I should say? Okay. I'm going to ask folks then to direct it in the chat. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us and speaking on that. And as you mentioned, we will absolutely be sharing some more information out about an ACP adoption event. We're really excited on that, and we'll be sending out some save the dates and additional information soon. We may even be a little bit bold and try and plan one both in West Sacramento and Sacramento. We want to make sure we can reach different parts of the region and maybe even expand beyond that. So thank you so much, Kevin. And next, I want to welcome Julius Austin, who is the Sacramento Promise Zone Manager working with the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency to discuss local digital equity initiatives and the a juxtaposition of that within his work at SHRA. So Julius, I will hand the microphone over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Caitlin, I just want to check in. Will I have ability to share screen?
Yes, you should. Let me just double check here on our end, but yes, you have ability to share screen. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm recognizing that I am last, and I am kind of probably in front of a lot of folks at lunchtime. So I will save us some time and reduce my presentation, because I also recognize that it's really awesome to be in this space with so many awesome folks who understand digital equity and what's needed to ensure that folks have access to broadband, access to devices, and also have the digital literacy piece. Following our other presenters, I don't want to reiterate a lot of the things that they've mentioned because I think we're all familiar with, the term last mile and what that means. And what I want to add to last mile is to get us to focus on, if we really want full equity, full inclusion, I encourage you and I challenge you to make sure you go the extra mile. And so the communities that we're trying to really focus on in the Promise Zone, those areas of Sacramento that are hit in regards to, high rates of poverty, low education outcomes, high unemployment rates, poor health outcomes. It's going to take more money and resources. It's going to take more time, and it's going to take a larger commitment for us to really ensure that they are going to be included and receive the equity that they deserve. And so I think to add context to all of the wonderful things that have been spoken about and all of the wonderful things that are being done from all of the partners who spoke, both federal, state, and local partners, let me just share a little video to add a little bit of context and, like I like to call, a little humanity to this discussion today. I will get queued up and just share a little video before I share a little bit about some efforts that we're taking in the Promise Zone and also with SHRA.
The world is changing now. Access to information really does draw the line between the haves and the have-nots.
I grew up across the street. I felt like I had a fantastic time as a kid. I felt honored to serve my community, but I feel like I need to do more.
This school and this community, there's something special about it. We've been talking internet, technology, laptops for kids for a good 10 years. It started with just trying to get our kids some one-to-one devices. And then we ran into the issue of internet at home. We were tasked with sending 350 laptops home with kids. The access piece became the challenge. And then COVID.
I think the pandemic really highlighted the inequity that was already there, and broadband was a big part of that. When classes moved online, when work moved online, when everything said, oh, it's okay, just look it up if you need to enroll in food stamps, and didn't fully connect the fact that there's whole sections of our community that either because of lack of infrastructure or cost didn't have access to that resource.
The community is served by cable, and they haven't stepped up to the plate. So when Prasad came and asked about 5G, we thought, oh, cool, we can start to use a new technology here.
Back in January of 2020, essentially enabled 150 megahertz of free spectrum. You can easily blanket 1 square mile with an outdoor cellular radio.
The project that they're working on right now is installing the radio so that we can provide high-speed internet to Marina Vista.
The teachers have become really comfortable, and the kids have really learned some skills that are going to help them transition to the new technology that we're all using.
The minute schools closed, Food Literacy Center thought, well, our solution is that we could now possibly offer virtual class. We've gotten them addicted to vegetables and they still want to keep eating healthy at home. They're kindergartners, they might have lost the recipe. Well, if they have internet, they can get online and they can find that same recipe that they cooked in their food literacy class and they can make it with their families.
The ultimate goal is to give the students the skills, but to help increase their learning outcomes. And I think those things have happened over time.
Today, when we actually saw the system working very well, when we had all 6 or 8 kids doing what they typically do, and they were saying, oh, this is working very nice. It was very gratifying. Whatever you worked on is actually has shown results.
We are seeing very good results. We are getting good feedback. And in some cases, we are seeing a speed of 100 megabits per second, which is phenomenal.
I am grateful for everybody that has made it possible for our kids being able to get 5G without any hassle. And hopefully this is just the start. This is like a pilot, not just for our community. Hopefully it takes off to other communities that also need it.
People who care about this issue are all over, and you want them to have a role in developing the technology that's going to serve the future.
This neighborhood has been ready for this type of attention and investment for a while. I'm excited about what this means, not just for this neighborhood, but for other neighborhoods in Sacramento and around the state.
This is a technology pebble that's being dropped into a pond. And the ramifications of the ripple effects, I think, are going to be national.
We are committed to making digital equity a cornerstone of our inclusive economic development strategy, and we're backing it up with real dollars. We spent millions of dollars of our CARES Act funding to help our school kids during the pandemic. Those kids, our kids, deserve the same access to technology as kids from any other part of the city.
All right, so I hope adding a bit of humanity with that video allows us to kind of refocus, re-energize, or for some folks to even learn even more how important it is to make sure that those communities that are hardest hit deserve an opportunity to have digital equity and inclusion, because we know that it is not just access to broadband, it's access to education, it's access to jobs, it's access to health, it's access to a greater opportunity to thrive and not just survive. And so the video was created based off a pilot program that we did in partnership with many partners, but it really focused on families who have students who are residents and SHRAs, Marina Vista and Alder Grove public housing communities, but the students are students who attend Leotada Floyd Elementary School. I think most folks on this call know that Leotada Floyd is extremely close to those two public housing sites. And those two public housing sites, there's about 751 households. And what was taking place was a recognition that many of the students who were being provided laptops still didn't have the ability to use them for distance learning. And so we had some great partners come together to take advantage of CBRS and create a 5G infrastructure that would provide the opportunity for those students and families to connect and use broadband for their needs. And ultimately, as you kind of heard in the video, it was able to provide broadband access that was greater efficacy, greater speeds than the normal internet service providers. So we didn't create something that was on the lower end. It was something that was even better than it would have received if they had paid for, like I said, Comcast or Xfinity or AT&T, et cetera. And when we surveyed the families who had taken advantage of the pilot program, I don't know if I mentioned there were 25 families. 90% of them said that it was a solution that was easy for them to gain access to Wi-Fi. 85% of them said it was something that helped make their daily work and their daily lives easier. And 93% of them said, hey, I would recommend this to my neighbors, my friend, my family members. And 87% of them said this was way better than any home Wi-Fi that I've ever had. And so what we learned from that pilot and what we were able to create with that broadband infrastructure, we thought was something that was phenomenal and should be scaled. And so ultimately what we pursued after the success of the pilot was the funding, the partnerships necessary to expand that infrastructure so that all 751 households would be able to receive this type of broadband access for no cost to the residents, right? And I think that's an extremely important piece. You know, we see some awesome programs like the Affordable Connectivity Program out there that is going to reduce costs. But when you are looking at folks living in poverty and struggling to pay bills, struggling to figure out where the next meal is coming from, and trying to reduce other barriers that they have, like transportation, et cetera, even a small cost can be a deterrent. So we're really excited that we partnered with, as you see, Council Member Katie Valenzuela, Mayor Steinberg, and went to the city to have some funds allocated. It was actually $1.4 million that was approved for the broadband infrastructure project back in November of 2022 at a city council meeting. And we've been expounding the efforts necessary to get the infrastructure plan created and finalized, build the infrastructure, and make sure that there's access for all of those households. And what we hope is that this will be an example and a model that can be spread across our city, but also something that could be spread across this country. And so I recognize we are coming up against our 12:30 end time. I'll stop there just to save any moments for any questions. And also I'd be glad to answer any questions of anyone outside of this space. All you got to do is call me anytime and I can put my information in the chat.
Thank you so much, Julius. I want to say for that inspiring and heartwarming video. I think so much we get caught up in the PowerPoint presentations and the numbers and the data and don't think about the actual human side of who are affected by these different digital equity, policies and outcomes. So thank you so much for that. And also, Julius, I want to give you a sincere thank you for all of your work bringing community members into our May 11th workshop. Julius was instrumental in getting folks there. And I really want to thank him for that and also for taking the time to join us today. So thank you so much, Julius. And we have 1 minute left. My last slide is just sharing our next coalition meeting with you all, but does anybody have any questions for Julius? If not, I would love to share that video in our meeting follow-up notes. And thank you again. That has definitely lit a fire in me this Friday afternoon, Julius. So thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem.
All righty. Well, coming in right at 12:30 here. Thank you all so much for joining us today. A huge shout out to all of our guest speakers for coming here today and sharing all of this wonderful information. Our next quarterly meeting will be on Friday, September 29th from 11 to 12:30. And the registration, I think, will be dropped in the chat shortly, but we'll also be sending it out along with all of the other post-meeting materials. And we'll be following up with exciting things to come later this summer and early fall, including different ACP and digital equity events. So thank you all so much for joining us. Have a wonderful Saturday. Enjoy the cool weather before it gets in the hundreds next week, sadly, which is not my favorite thing about summer. But thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.